This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World. It's JJ Meets World. This is your host with the most, JJ. Listen, today's episode has got Christopher Zimmerman, who is the conductor for the FM Symphony Orchestra. Christopher has a very interesting story. He talks about being a dual citizen of the United Kingdom as well as the United States. He talks about his time at Yale at length, and what it takes to actually become a conductor, and his thoughts and theories on music. Very cool stuff. Plus, I tell you about how much it sucks to be tall and why I think sometimes I wish I could just be a regular old shorty like Tucker.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Went to a play this afternoon, and I sat in the middle of a section, middle of the row.
Nightmare scenario.
Well, it is for the people around me. And the second that I started making my way towards there's only 2 seats left in this row.
You were a latecomer.
No, the show hadn't started yet.
Okay.
But, I mean, I was the last person to get into that row. So, technically, late for the row. I didn't know row D that we were all going to arrive there 20 minutes early. But I got this sound, which I've had many times before. Ugh.
Right.
I'm a tall person.
You are.
I paid for my seat just like how you paid for your seat. Would you do that to someone in a wheelchair?
Do you think that their issue was you were tall?
It is.
So it's people from rows behind you.
It is. And so much to the point of where I was at, what movie was I seeing recently? I was at Gone with the Wind. 4-hour-long epic of Gone with the Wind. I sat in the seat that I purchased, and when I purchased my seats, 5 other tickets had been sold in the whole theater, and I picked specifically with no one sitting behind me. 2 minutes in the movie, tap, tap, tap on my shoulder, and the guy was polite, and he goes, "Sir, you're very tall. Would you please move down to these empty seats so that we can see?" Well, I was happy because there was an empty seat to my left and to my right, but if I move over, now all of a sudden I'm encroached
on someone else.
But I moved. When I went and saw The Book of Mormon in Minneapolis, I was in the 3rd row. I was on top of buying tickets to this thing. So excited. I brought Jill's whole family. So there's a group of 9 of us. And then the whole time, I can't even see. And I know that being tall isn't a disability, but I didn't choose to be tall.
Right.
I chose to be a fan of musicals and theater.
There's no height limitation for what seat you're ordering at a concert.
There is not. And
or
that's
show or whatever you're
it's
saying.
the luck of the draw, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
So stop. People of the world, stop being so heightist. Is that it?
You've added another reason why I hate going out to things and dealing with other people.
Oh,
I like how in this podcast world, like, we get to just be in this room.
Yeah.
That we don't have to go and, like, be next to other people.
if I wanted to do this pantsless, I could.
You often do.
Now, here's the thing. At 6'3", 6'4", when I'm wearing my shoes, I slump down in my seat to the best of my abilities. I contort my back into a position that makes me uncomfortable the entire time I am there. And so, even though I am silently doing this for the people around me, because I know it's tough to see around me, they still are giving me all of that crap. And it bothers me. Now, here's where I tie it in to our guest today. So, we get to talk with conductor Christopher Zimmerman from the Fargo-Moorhead Symphony Orchestra. He comes in and spends a week here, conducts the orchestra, rehearses them, and then flies out. He tells some pretty amazing stories during this, including some of his time in France. But I went to the symphony the night we interviewed Mr. Zimmerman, and at the symphony, somebody did the same thing to me. And I picked a seat far back in the house, not the last row, but pretty far back in the house, and they did the same thing. And I got self-conscious, and so I got up and I asked the usher, are there any other seats? So I ended up in the balcony.
Oh.
And here's the thing I thought about. Wait a minute. I'm at the symphony. You don't need to technically see this whole thing.
You don't.
You can close your eyes and enjoy this movement that's taking place.
Right.
Also, the stage at Festival Concert Hall is enormous, and it was packed to the gills with people.
But there's probably someone out there who can't fully appreciate a symphony without having direct eye contact with the flugelhorn.
What are the odds that I sat right in front of that one person, though?
I guess you found out.
It was awful. It's just awful.
As a 5'7" guy, I don't really have that issue.
No, you don't. You
don't.
And every time you go to visit someone's church or youth center, they're probably not asking you to change light bulbs.
I'm trying to understand if I have more or less privilege than you. I'm not sure.
They probably never tried to charge you extra in an airline.
Usually height is an advantage.
It usually
Especially on an evolutionary scale.
Actually,
you and I pitted in battle, you would just win. For your sheer size over me.
I don't know. You think of who was that guy who played for the Bulls, that real short guy, and he was so fast and he got around all the big legs.
Oh.
He was in Space Jam. I can't remember his name. They had a funny joke, too, because he's walking with the doctor while they're all getting checked out.
Right.
And all the other basketball players knock their heads on the ceiling except for him. Muggsy Bogues?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Anyway.
Bruce Lee was short. Wolverine was short.
Yeah. And they've got this low center of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
It makes it also, if we're playing baseball, where exactly is your strike zone?
Basically, being short, I have a superpower, is what we're saying.
You do.
I can condense into overhead luggage if you need me to, and it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. You probably fit in most beds, even European beds.
I think so.
I don't. I do not. So let's get on with the show today. We got this is a pretty interesting episode, and I think it's an episode people are going to listen to for a long time.
This guy was awesome. I had so much fun talking to him and listening to him, and he's great. And
he's also British, by the way. So get ready for a great accent,
which is a plus.
Yeah,
especially in this land, we really love British accents in this part of the world. We really, really do. It's the most exotic thing that ever comes to our shores. But I also, after talking to him, I do want to go back and try out the FM Symphony again. Go take a listen to something. It's been years since I've gone, which is a shame. And I need to go back and try that.
If this ignites your excitement about the FM Symphony, think about going back and listening to our episode with Linda Boyd, who is the executive director of the FM Symphony.
And if you like listening to someone with a European accent, go back and listen to Maz's episode or Monika's episode.
So many great episodes. So, folks, get ready. You're gonna want to probably get some cool classical music ready to listen to after this episode of JJ Meets World. But Christopher Zimmerman is our guest today. Thank you very much to those of you who donated on Patreon. If you haven't been there, every dollar helps. Thank you to those folks who have. Patreon.com/JJ Meets World. Let's get this thing rolling. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4.
JJ Meets World.
Welcome to the podcast, Christopher Zimmerman.
Thank you, JJ. Thank you.
I've had a chance to chat with you in my day job over at the radio station. I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit deeper as an artist and a human being during our conversation. So can we start with this? Where are you from?
Well, yeah, we can. So I am from south of London, about 15 miles south of London.
Thanks for turning it into miles and not kilometers. Okay, thanks for not using the metric system.
Right. In the county of Surrey. Do you know anything about England?
I do. In fact,
lots of counties.
Yep.
So I'm in the London area. These days it's still not. London is huge, but where I grew up, a small town called Kingswood, is still just out of London, but London's a huge place, as you know. So it's an immediate suburb of London. My mum came from Connecticut, was born in Connecticut. So I've always had dual citizenship. I grew up in England. I was born and grew up in England, but I've always had dual citizenship, which is actually, I don't know if we're going to get there in this conversation, but has proved quite handy
I can imagine
during my career.
Better than not having it, right?
Better than not having it. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. Well, anyway, so so that's where I'm from, and I went to school. I came over to this country to go to college.
And where'd you go to school?
I went to Yale, believe it or not. And I say believe it or not because, as you probably know, and you read about it all the time now, getting into any college. I have 2 children, and they're both. One is actually at college, the other one is graduated. And they did not go to particularly well-known places like Yale, right? And even where they went, there's no way I would get in. I mean, it's so competitive. Getting into somewhere like Yale these days, I don't know how anyone does it. So how did I get in, you ask?
Yeah.
Complete luck. Actually, I would call it, what's that word? When you're influenced by your family. No, nepotism. I'll tell you why I say that. Because because my mother came from Connecticut, as a family, we used to come over to this country a lot on holiday and stuff. So I had a big connection when I was a kid with America already. And my elder brother, who's 6 years, I have 2 older brothers, but the next one up is 6 years older than me, and he wanted to come to college over here, and he is very bright and very academic, and he got into Yale, and probably deservedly so. I still think even he might not get in these days because you know how competitive it is. And I think because he did so well, that's why I got him, because this isn't false modesty entirely. I mean, I'm not completely stupid, but I'm certainly not academically that bright. And in fact, I'm not that bright compared with the people who get in now. And I had an interview, which probably went okay, but I think it's because they thought, well, his elder brother is really pretty smart. There must be something to this. So that was amazing. Because I applied to a few other places over here because I wanted to come to the States like my older brother did. And I think Yale, places which weren't as well known as Yale, and I think Yale was the only one I got into. So definitely was a case of this. So
what was the college experience like at Yale? I mean, it really is.
It's a liberal art.
One of the greatest, Ivy League schools out
I know,
there.
and I, I'm sort of, I've decided not to be embarrassed about going. Might as well say I went, because and also coming from England, as a kid, I mean, I didn't know this place was so. It's like Oxford and Cambridge, but I didn't know that. I just went because he went there, What was it like? It's a liberal arts college, like I think any other liberal arts college. It's nice, I had a good time. I graduated successfully, just.
In the allotted amount of time? Or?
No, absolutely, no. In the allotted amount of time.
Well, that's good to know.
4 years was pretty. And I studied... because it was an undergraduate liberal arts degree. It was not in a particular instrument. It was a music degree, BM. But I was playing piano and violin, and I took lessons. I played in the Yale Symphony Orchestra, the violin. And I kind of wanted music to be my thing, but I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be, and it certainly wasn't. I didn't think anything to do with conducting until I had this sort of thing, which was I loved playing in the symphony, but I was like most young musicians, I was into my own part, and I was a violinist, and the guy on the box, the conductor, I had no idea what they were doing.
Isn't that that's sort of universal for every job, right? So everyone thinks that the person on the box doesn't know what they're doing.
Right. But I remember the time when I thought, this stuff, this orchestral music is so great. I've got to get to know about how it's put together, outside my own part. It was actually playing a Mahler symphony, I remember, Mahler's Second Symphony, which is a huge piece, and I was right in the bowels of the orchestra. I was actually in the front of the second violins. So, it's not entirely true, but sort of the first violins have the melody and stuff, and the second violins and the violas.
I loved playing second violin in high school.
Innards, right?
I did. Yeah. I absolutely loved it.
Because you have the innards of the music. You have
you get the harmonies, and you get to add something pretty to something that's already pretty.
Yeah, or you don't, or you get all the entrails. I like that. And this piece, it just blew me away playing this piece, and so that kind of got me so curious about the whole picture of a piece of music. And then at the same time, because of the liberal arts college, you could take outside your major or outside courses you had to take. You could take what they called seminars, and there was one on conducting, but not on the practical aspect of conducting. Because I didn't want to stand up on a box and look like an idiot. I didn't. It was about sort of what it's about, and I thought, okay, I'll take this. It was actually taught by a visiting professor who was a conductor, and I really got fascinated by it. And then I kind of got bit by the bug, and I thought, maybe I'll try and see if I can do this. But I really, at that point, I was, because I'm actually not naturally particularly, I don't think I've got better at it, but I'm not naturally an extrovert person who wants to stand up in front of people and be an idiot, But I got bitten by it, and then I pursued it, and I took, other than violin and piano, I took all the other things you have to do pretty serious about this, harmony, counterpoint, orchestration, all these things, and sort of pursued it fairly relentlessly thereafter.
So when you make a choice to switch over to conducting, did you ever feel the need to learn more in-depthly about other instruments at all? Get a little bit of percussion background, a little bit of background, with a cello or anything like that?
So I would say it wasn't really switching over. It's true. I still play the piano, but I didn't pursue violin, and I kind of regret it a bit, as much as I might have, or maintain, I should say, violin as much as I might have. Sort of. I would say the knowledge of that is accumulated over time, rather than, okay, now I need to have a smattering of how to play every single instrument. It wasn't like that. I haven't done that. Maybe I should have. I don't know. I think what the pursuit was more in how to in depth learn a score, and then thereafter, of course, the most important, not the most important, the two most important aspects, I think, of successfully conducting are the ability to really learn a piece of music and the ability to conduct. Duh. Now, what I mean by that is the ability to be able to communicate with people, whereby you can, as a collaboration, you can get what you want. So that is not conducting technique. That's not what I mean. The conducting technique, the 1, 2, 3, 4 stuff, is relatively simple, as you probably know. Obviously, far more simple than learning an instrument. But that's actually not what technique is, really. Technique is the ability to get people to, not quite to do what you want. Sort of to do what you want, but to enthuse them to do what you want collaboratively, I would say.
Okay.
And you can't learn that, in a room conducting. You can only learn that through conducting. So that's where it's a little bit different from being an instrumentalist, because obviously the equivalent of sitting in your at the piano or violin practicing is learning a score. That's the equivalent there. But the actual conducting itself can only be done conducting, So that's why you have to get practical experience.
So, I mean, there's a certain amount of leadership that goes into conducting. Have you been were you a natural leader?
That's a great question. That's a great point and question. No, and the answer is, and I never really thought that was the case. And had I known about that like I do now, I don't think I would have kept going, actually, because I this is not false modesty. This is the confession, and I probably shouldn't say this over the air. I don't think I'm a good leader at all. In most respects, I think I have the ability to enthuse with some passion musicians. I do think that, but as a general, if I'm not what's it called, a type A leader type,
yeah.
If I'm in other aspects of my life, I'm never the one. I don't think I am. Maybe I'm bossy. It's possible these days. I don't know, but I don't feel that actually. But you're right. That has to be an essential part, I think. But I think I only realize that, again, once you're actually in the position to have to do that. That would be more the job of a music director. Again, not the conducting itself, but in a position like I am here, of course, artistically speaking, you're a leader. And I hope reasonably successful. I don't think it necessarily means you have to be like a leader of a military unit or something. I mean, I'm sure.
Right. You don't need to be a dictator. There's that difference between this is what I'm going to tell you to do, and you do it or you don't do it,
no,
and then I'll kick you out of the symphony. You have
to obviously take things, have responsibilities, and take your responsibilities seriously. And I suppose you have to be a leader in the sense that you do have to inspire people. That is true. But the other, do you know what I mean? I still think the other qualities of being a leader, I somehow don't think I have those. I don't know.
Well, isn't it kind of the same for any collaborative art, where you're basically taking things that can be art in their own sense, on their own terms, and putting them in a room together, and then trying to make something new out of it. So a violinist could just go, busk on a street corner and express themselves artistically that way, but then when they come to an orchestra, they're collaborating with all these other musicians and the conductor and whoever wrote the score, in a sense, and they're interpreting it into something new.
Yes, and that's the Bible, kind of the piece of music in front of. I mean, obviously you interpret it, because even though there are a lot of details written down, it has to be brought to life. So, but I mean, I try to get to know the piece as well as I can and take the cues from the piece. The business about, I just wanted to, when you said the violinist who now becomes part of orchestra, one of the I think in certainly difficulties, if not problems, of the whole orchestra world is that it is collaborative, but it's not in. And maybe it depends on the level of the orchestra. These big orchestras, most of the players are pretty frustrated with their jobs. I don't think they should, I think they often, let's take a major symphony orchestra. I don't quite understand when I hear that they're complaining a lot about their job because they actually get paid very well for something which they purport to want to do. So that, I think, is a good thing, and I'm not quite sure why there is so much complaints which you hear about. But I do understand that this is what I'm saying is that they have to give up their musical, responsibility. They have to subvert it to the conductor.
Yep. Submit it.
Subvert it?
Well,
I think actually unfortunately, most modern day conductors like to think, and I do actually generally think I'm fairly collaborative, but at the end of the day, I'm the boss and I'm the one who makes the decisions, usually the musical decisions. I mean, it is collaborative in the sense that I listen to what's happening, and I haven't got everything, I actually do have everything worked out beforehand, but I'm happy to adjust it. But when orchestras are playing week in, week out with a different conductor, a different person on the box telling them what to do, I do understand that artistically that must be frustrating. But that is part of what an orchestral musician gets into, and I think they have to make the most of it. My son is actually an orchestral musician, and I've talked to him about this, He's a good violinist, and he's aiming for, and I think he's likely to get a position in a major symphony orchestra. He's already a sub for the Pittsburgh Orchestra, and he's only 25 years old, and he's looking for a big job. I think he understands this, because I think he has the personality whereby maybe he will at times get frustrated over the years, but I think he has the mindset whereby he will enjoy that type of life, because he loves the music so much, and I don't think it grates him too much, as long as the conductor is reasonably good, that someone else is kind of leading, you know.
When I think of the fact that ego is a part of art in some ways, because to me, ego is part of the drive, right? I want this. I want this. I love playing this instrument so much that I want this to be what I do day in and day out.
Right.
And so, having to take your cues from somebody else can be difficult, but at the same time, I also think, well, this is my chance to strive to make my individual part the best it possibly can be.
I think it's very well put. And that's ideal.
Right. And in almost everything, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in a play, right? So you might think that the person next to you is putting the breath in the wrong spot in the line, but you're responsible for getting your line in or out.
Right.
And just focusing there out.
Well, I think another way to describe, though, too, what a conductor does, which I think is the same as a director for a play or a movie, is you sort of set the tone of the collaboration. The buck does stop with you. You have to have that at some point, because design by committee doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But also, though, if you are even not in that directorial position, I acted in plays for 15 years before I directed anything. You also learn that you can collaborate and submit to a director at the same time, and that the most fruitful collaborations, in my opinion, have always been when discovery was sort of prized over decision. So you can make decisions all day long, like a plan that goes into it. But when you're in the moment, if suddenly something surprises you, and you discover it, and you go, that's beautiful, we should do it like that, then you go with that. You find what seems to work instead. And the director and the conductor set the tone for all of that.
I think the analogy between conductor and director is a good one up to a point. My wife's actually a director.
Okay.
So, but I think there are two differences. One is that, of course, the director is not there on the night. So
that's true.
They could all go along with he or she, and then they can do what they want.
That's a good point.
But I mean, obviously the basic analogy is a good one. But the other thing is that I think it depends on the instrument. So, if you're one of 14 first violinists, it's not the same as being a character in a play.
Sure.
Really. Well, it's the same as maybe being part of
an extra
or a part of a chorus or something in a play. But I that's kind of what I meant. I think, the principal oboist has a different relationship musically
than
with
the contrabassoonist.
No, than the fourth stand second violin.
Oh, okay.
Because there's one first oboe and there are 35 violins, or 15 second violins, and the whole point that of the best orchestras in the world, one of the things which makes them so good is their unanimity, precisely not their individuality in the violin section. I mean, you watch a great orchestra like the Berlin Philharmonic actually is a little bit different. They actually do somehow have some individuality, but a really great orchestra, when you watch the whole string section, I mean, they're let's take the bowing. I mean, they bow in exactly the same part of the bow, and everything is supposed to be completely unanimous, and that's where the individuality actually gets suppressed, I think. At least technically speaking, perhaps mentally not. I'm not really sure. But so I think there's a bit of a difference between the... I agree with the concept business. I mean, the job of the director versus job of the conductor, indeed, there are many similarities. You're absolutely right. Setting the tone, obviously having the vision of how you think the whole thing should be put together. This is entirely the same. Dealing with people over a long period of time, although with plays, of course, it's over a much longer period of time. I mean, I'm lucky here. I have 4.5 rehearsals, but in Fairfax, my other orchestra, I have 3 rehearsals. The whole thing's over with in 3 days. Whereas with the play, right, it goes on for weeks. So I always tell my wife, you're so lucky. With all this time to prepare. Yeah.
But of course, that's a full orchestra put together at the same time. You're obviously working weeks, months in advance.
I am preparing my music. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So really, if you walk in with a half-baked idea of what you're going to do,
not a good idea.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So here's a question I've always been curious of. So for someone like yourself, who music is your career, obviously you enjoy it. What aspects or pieces of music are you just tired of? Where someone suggests, "Why don't we do this?" and you think, "Nope, there's no life left in this for me."
Another good question, and I don't. Let me think. I mean, there are very few pieces that I've done which. Well, there are very few pieces I've done which I just don't like. There's one or two, but then I'm not tired of them because I don't go back to them. So you're talking about pieces which are probably great pieces, which, after a while, Jesus Christ, do I have to do this again? They're not. I'm struggling to think of one because, sort of, as I was saying, by definition, they're great pieces of music. There is. I mean, I love this piece. The New World Symphony by Dvorak, I have conducted a lot. So if I'm asked tomorrow the good thing about that is I know it really well. I don't have to spend
just jump right into it.
Yeah, exactly. And because it's a great piece of music, and I love it. But that is a piece which, I could go without doing it for a bit.
Sure.
There are pieces occasionally that I just don't speak to me, and they're often pieces which, they're composers I love. This is actually, in a way, it's both frustrating and interesting. Take Sibelius. Sibelius, a Finnish composer, is one of my favorite composers. I'm eternally fascinated by this guy. Part of that fascination is that sometimes it infuriates me. There are parts of his music which I just don't understand why he does a certain thing. And I'm always trying to figure it out, and I never quite know, At the same time, it's not actually a hate relationship. It's a love, tiny bit frustration relationship, And I sometimes think that part of my love for it is that I do get frustrated. I'm always trying to figure out why does he do that there? Why doesn't this do that? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas other composers, are more perfect, but somehow I don't necessarily have a love affair with them quite as much. I don't have a love affair with Beethoven on the whole, or Mozart. It's great music. Beethoven has grown on me over the years, but he's never been a composer who is completely in my bloodstream. There's some from day one are and remain there, and some actually who kind of are and have gone out a bit and maybe come back. It's kind of interesting to me, at least.
Well, I'm a theater fanatic, but I find Shakespeare to be one of the most overrated pieces that I find out there, and which is oftentimes met with some people going like, "Well, you're just not cultured enough." Then I'd be like, "No, it's just my personal preference."
I completely understand that. To me, the problem with Shakespeare, is it's just very hard language to me. I find the same with Bach in a way. I actually love Bach. I actually love Shakespeare too. But some of it is impenetrable for me. But my reverence and love for it isn't fake. I genuinely do believe and think that it is the most incredible stuff, including Shakespeare, I have to say. I don't really agree with you. I would not say I don't like Shakespeare. If it's done, I've seen productions where I think it's just unbelievable. I get it, why it's put up there.
I think that's my problem, is that I have seen more bad Shakespeare in my entire life. That, imagine going and listening to, you only get to hear middle school renditions of Beethoven's Fifth. Eventually you're going to be like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And one of the problems is long. Beethoven, I keep saying Beethoven, sorry, Shakespeare is so long. That's another thing. If you don't like something, then having to hear 3.5 hours of it is, don't you think, though, at times, I think, I say this sometimes when I'm trying to, if someone comes to me, which they do occasionally, and say, I don't understand this music. What is it that you like about it? Or, they're sort of interested that I like it so much and they don't. I sometimes say, because this has happened to me, if there's a piece which you just don't get, but suddenly if there's one bit of it that you get, if you can latch onto one part, which you think is beautiful, once that happens, then the rest of it can start to get into your bloodstream. And I think that with Shakespeare, so I'm sure you agree, JJ, there are parts where you hear the language, you think, my God, that it has really been put beautifully. I mean, there must be parts.
Oh, I
And
saw
if
Twelfth
that-
Night in Chicago,
if that
and it was one of
happens-
the best plays I've ever seen in my entire life.
Right, so
And
you
that
have-
was the
yeah.
moment where I was like, okay, maybe I don't
And-
dislike Shakespeare. I don't like bad Shakespeare.
Right.
Unfortunately, you see way more bad Shakespeare than that. But I had that same moment with a symphony orchestra when I listened to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. It was the moment I went there on a date. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's go on this date, and maybe we can make out afterwards.
Get through this music
Right, yeah.
crap.
But I was so moved by it. I felt passion and I felt humor and all of these things
That's
that I had
great.
never felt before. And it was only because I was comparing it to my time in high school band and having to listen to that, and that being just such a horrible 3 weeks of my life that I gave away.
That's really too bad, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And I had this preconceived notion that completely changed after that. And then I think I've been lucky to be in Fargo because the Fargo Symphony is doing such
I'm
interesting
glad
things.
you said that. I mean, we're not the Chicago Symphony, but I'm glad you at least.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love going out to Blue Stem for Symphony Rocks. The things that you guys have done in the First Presbyterian Church those are moving,
Right.
moments. And then you've got a show tonight that I've got tickets for to come see.
I think you'll like it.
I'm very excited about it. So let's dive back a little bit into you. So you become a conductor. How does that career work?
Well, I mean, so everyone is different, obviously. So what did I do? I'll tell you. I'll go back a little bit if that's of interest.
Please do.
So I was at Yale. We talked about this, and I took this class not really knowing if I was, and I got bitten by the bug basically. So then I was fairly determined to try and get some skills under my belt. Excuse me. To apply to what this is. So I went to a summer course in a place called Fontainebleau in France. It's just south of Paris. This is a long time ago, guys. I'm very old. It was in 1978, I think, 1978. This is a school for, an intense sort of training for musicians and also architects. Actually, it has two different disciplines under the same roof. It was kind of interesting. And the teacher there, you probably haven't heard of her, but she's actually, well, maybe you have. Was extremely famous woman called Nadia Boulanger. This French woman who is the most famous musical pedagogue ever, actually. She knew Stravinsky, believe it or not. She taught, I'm not making this up, at some level, Aaron Copland. And you're thinking, how old is this woman? Very old. So she was 95 when I went to Fontainebleau in 1978. Wow. And she was the head of this school, but she had other teachers who we took classes from. We took classes in harmony and counterpoint and all these disciplines you had to do. And they were fairly fearsome. The French system, they don't suffer fools lightly, And we would take, if we were lucky, one or two private lessons with Mademoiselle Boulanger herself. Now, she's 95, right? And she lives in this, I'm not making this up. The Fontainebleau is a huge castle, a bit like a mini Versailles. This place is huge, beautiful French, intimidating piece of architecture. And the classes and her apartment were all on one wing, And I had 2 lessons with her. And the first one, so you arrive at the appointed time for I think it was like a 20-minute, half-hour lesson. And the lesson was going to be playing exercises on the piano for her, harmony exercises, so that she could see you're doing the right thing. And I waited outside the door of her apartment, and I'm not making this up. There is a picture on the wall, a painting of cattle going to the slaughter. I'm thinking, this is
let's get that for the studio.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So anyway, I'm ushered in, and Mademoiselle Boulanger is not there. So I'm thinking, and then I hear this little voice, Monsieur, sit down at the piano. And she's in the other room. She's bedridden.
Oh.
She's 95, right? And so she says, play. Because she knew I had so I play my exercise. And she's quite far away, you know. And suddenly I hear, no, he's wrong, you know. She's correcting this stuff, and she's hearing these inner voices that I'm playing in the harmonies. You've taken harmony, right? I don't know if you guys have, but there are rules to how the voices work. Right? You can't have parallel fifths, and the voice leading has to be correct, and blah, blah, blah. She's hearing all this, you know. So I play. Anyway, I sort of get through it. I survive. And then I had one more lesson with her a few weeks later. And this time I go up to the downstairs door, right? And the window opens up. And it's like being in an 18th century merchant ivory film or something. So the window opens up and this basket comes down that lowers the basket. And in the basket is this big key because I'm supposed to let myself in. It's this big bloody thing. So, I go, you know, in I go. Yeah, cattle at the slaughter, blah, blah, blah. And I go in, and this time she's there. And she's a tiny woman. I mean, seriously, she's about 4 foot. She's bent over, and she's not big anyway, but she's old. So she was about barely 5 foot. And she says, monsieur, come sit at the piano. And this time she wants me to play something for her. And I prepared a little Brahms piece, I think. So I'm really prepared, right? Because I'm like, and so she's sitting right there. Play. So I play this piece, and it goes really well. I'm thinking, I'm not screwing up too much. And I'm done, you know? And I look over, and she's fast asleep.
Well, you played Brahms.
Right. That's the last time I saw her. And actually, I think I was the last straw. She died that summer, I think, just after. So I just thought I'd tell you those stories. So that was the start of my kind of learning about this stuff. And then after that, what happened? I graduated from Yale, as I told you, on time.
You certainly like mentioning that, so keep doing.
Well, you said you did it on time. So
people usually just say that they went to a school, but that he's like graduated.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Sometimes all you need to do is just clarify that moment because for example, Lori Laughlin's daughters will say that they went to Yale, but they're certainly not graduating from there.
I went to Yale, North Carolina.
Right. I went and visited. Yes. Again, this was kind of strange. So I then I was taking some lessons from a musician who lived in New York, and again, it was kind of piano-y stuff. And I say stuff; it was score study, and I was just trying to get this stuff under my belt a bit. But time was running out, as was money, and he recommended that he thought I had some talent, so he recommended a graduate school with a well-known teacher who I'd never heard of or knew, and he happens to be a very well-known, I was lucky, a very well-known conductor teacher called Gustav Meyer. You might have heard of him. And so I contacted Meyer, and he knew this guy recommended me, so I just met him for a bite to eat somewhere, I remember. And he gave me a couple of tests. It was really informal, just to see what I knew. And then he said, okay, you can come and study with me. And so he was at the University of Michigan, so I went there. And I graduated 2 years later.
Well, I graduated from Fargo North High School in 2003.
Well, good for you, buddy.
2003. You're a youngster, yeah.
I graduated.
And then, again, what was I going to do? So I think this is uncommon compared with most young conductors today. But I had no job, right? And I'd graduated. Someone recommended to me that one way of trying to sort of get a foot in the door is if you can somehow latch on, and I say this not in a seedy way, but kind of, well, actually, there's a phrase for it in our world, coattailing. If you can find someone who you really respect and can sort of go to their rehearsals and maybe get lessons or something like that, then that's a good way to get started. In fact, Andrew Davis, who's an English conductor, was the music director of the Toronto Symphony, which is relatively near Ann Arbor, right? Michigan, where I was. And I went up there and I just sort of introduced myself. I think he's English, so the English connection probably helped. And he was very generous, actually, with his time. And I sat in on all rehearsals, studied all the scores. I actually even conducted the orchestra once, which was nice of him. And then during that time, it's a major orchestra. They had a lot of guest conductors, as these big orchestras do. And one of them was the conductor of the Czech Philharmonic, a man called Václav Neumann, who, when he came for a week, and I just thought he was unbelievable. And I don't think I'd have the balls to do this now, but I did then. So after his I went backstage. I strode backstage and knocked on his door and said, "Maestro, is there any way I can, I'm a conductor." I said, actually, I'm the assistant conductor of the Toronto Symphony, which wasn't entirely true. I was kind of apprentice to Andrew Davis, but I said, "Is there any way I could work with you?" And blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Oh, well, if you're the assistant of the Toronto Symphony, you must have something going for you." He just said, maybe to get rid of me, I don't know. He said, if you can get yourself to Prague, and like coattail again, I'll help you out. I had no money now at all, so I applied to. I thought, how am I going to do this? So I applied to both the American. I don't remember what it was called now. Some foundation whereby if you persuade them that you going to Prague is going to be for the great benefit of the entire country's cultural health, they'll give you money, right?
I'll graduate.
Yeah, right. And I did the same for the British equivalent. This is where I was saying the dual citizenship came in handy. The English equivalent, which is actually called the British Council. The Americans wisely probably didn't even respond. Bit rude. The English did. I convinced them that maybe it was good for the motherland as a whole if I go to Prague for a year. And they invited me for an interview. So I went, and my parents lived back in England, so I went home, quote unquote, and I went for this interview, which I thought went disastrously, but they didn't, and they gave me this scholarship to go to Prague for a year. Now, this is a long time ago. This is before the Iron Curtain, right? You guys weren't around.
But we've read books, we've know
read
what
books,
happened.
yeah. This was in actually 1985, so I'd been over.
I was born that year.
You were born that day. So
I read that book that year.
This was so you can imagine I'd been over in this country or Canada, but basically over here for how many years now? 7, maybe 6 or 7, and immediately now going to behind the Iron Curtain, and it was January when I went there, so it was I felt again like in one of those, not Merchant Ivory this time, in a sort of Stalin film. It was an amazing year, actually. So I lived in Prague and I worked with Neumann. Again, a bit like Davis, but even more intensely, sort of going to all rehearsals. And I studied a lot of Czech music with him, which was kind of valuable, I think. And then, of course, that ended. And what was I going to do? So I went back to England and I started eking a living, conducting, teaching a little bit. But I just wasn't getting enough work to really sustain. So it was the beginning of my career stumbling around a bit. So I then thought, okay, I'll apply to all sorts of things. I applied to some jobs over here as well. Dual citizenship helped. Although, I think, no, actually, even if I was just English, maybe the jobs I could have got, but it probably helped having dual. And I sort of got 2 jobs at the same time over here. One was a director of orchestras at CCM, that's Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati. And shortly thereafter, an orchestra about the size of this orchestra, the Bangor Symphony Orchestra, music director. So I just got married, so we moved from London to this country. This was in 1993. Been here ever since. This is many years. And so I've just been basically working here. I guest conduct in other places from time to time, but my work and life is basically here.
Wow.
That's how it is.
Do you find it difficult to have these little guest stints where you've got to pick up and go?
The slant of my career has changed a little bit over the last 10 years. So I was at CCM with Bangor, and then both of those kind of switched. I went to the Hart School of Music as director of orchestras, and I had another smaller orchestra in Texas. I did those 2 things. Then I applied for the Fairfax Symphony, which is where I am now, which is a slightly bigger organization. And I was offered that. So then I kind of jumped ship from the academic world to just go into the professional world. A little bit to the chagrin of my wife because of, well, one reason is because of benefits. The university is so. It was a financial. I took a bit of a financial hit. And then when I did that, it's not a full-time job like this one. I then applied to the Fargo-Moorhead, and then when I got that, so now I have the two orchestras, no academic position. But because it's still not an academic position, despite having two jobs, it's not day in, day out. So guest conducting, if I can get it, is easier to do. If you're on a faculty, they always say, it was very frustrating to me. They always say, for professional development, so-called, your bosses in an academic situation always say, we want you to do all this outside stuff. But when push comes to shove, if you then start getting that, they kind of get, well, we need you here, I always felt it, to be honest, was somewhat hypocritical. So without the academic side of things, I can at least, I'm free to do that if I can fit it in and if I get it. So, and as a matter of fact, it's more recently that I've got a little bit more guest engagements than I used to have. It's very not only sporadic, but I can't plan it. I mean, they either invite you or they don't, and sometimes years go by without much, and then suddenly 2 or 3 things come up in a row, and of course, often I get invited for things at exactly the same time, which is really annoying. Yeah. It doesn't rain, it pours. But recently I've had quite a few, and it's always back. Excuse me. It's always back to back. Well, so is Fargo and Fairfax, by the way, because the seasons are exactly the same time. They're always from September through May. So what happens normally, almost every concert this year has been literally either I'm here and 2 days later I start again in Fairfax, or, for instance, last Saturday I had a concert in Fairfax and my first rehearsal here was on Sunday. So I just fly in. It's back to back.
Racking up some miles.
Actually, yeah, indeed. Actually, the last concert here was when you had the -1 million.
Yep.
And I couldn't fly out for 3 days because the airport was closed. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It was so cold. So eventually I had to drive to Minneapolis on day 3, and I missed my first rehearsal back in Fairfax, which was a little bit nerve-wracking. So they're back-to-back has its disadvantages.
Especially considering that the season involves the heart of our worst weather.
I know.
Right?
And I know. So I basically my life is these 2 jobs plus some guest engagements when they happen.
Have you ever brought your family to Fargo? Have they ever journeyed out here with you at all?
Yes, they not my children, because they're but my wife has been, and she's going to come again next season. She's been twice, and she's had a good time. She's made friends with some of the orchestra, even though she hasn't been here very much because everyone's so friendly. I have to say that is true. It's really great. I really like this place. Also, the principal flute player, Deb Harris, has visited us because she and her husband, Gabe, went to the women's, when our lovely president got elected, the women's...
Yep.
What's it called? In D.C.
The march?
The march, the first one.
Yep, the women's march. Yeah.
They actually went to D.C.
Okay.
Good for them,
Yeah.
And they stay with us. So, and my wife got to know Deb quite well, and they became friends, even though it was a quick visit. So that was nice.
What's it like? So we've talked about dual citizenship a couple times here. Was there ever any pressure for you to declare one over the other?
No, I hope this is legal. I don't know how far out this is being broadcast when it is, but the Americans make a fuss about this. I think you're not supposed to have American citizenship and another, that you're supposed to renounce the other one. I
Really?
think. It used to be that way.
Yeah. So, for example, excuse me, I have a friend who was born on a U.S. Air Force base in Germany. So she had dual citizenship in Germany and the United States. And when she turned 18, there was a phenomenal amount of pressure by the U.S. government for her to declare one or the other. And so she eventually got a lawyer, and they said, no, you can have dual citizenship. You're good to go.
Yeah, I think it is legal, but they try to give you hell.
I wonder why, though. Like, what is the cost for that?
Because the Americans are arrogant. That's why. I mean, but actually, in my case, I always had the American because my mother's American. Mm-hmm. So, but I was born in England, so I think it wasn't acquiring. I don't know. Maybe I'm making this up, but I never had a problem. But I think, no, wait a minute. That's why I said no, this isn't right. What happened? Something. I can't remember now. I just remember at some point, even though I had both, maybe when I came to college here, there was some murmurings that it was not really supposed to be that way, but nothing. And I think it's gone in and out a bit. I think now it's fine, or every time there's a new administration,
it might just mean like you can't run for president or something.
Oh,
maybe,
dear.
maybe. Oh shucks,
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's that because we still have.
You're probably right. Actually, you have to have
that. I forget, how it is formalized, but that you have to be born as a naturalized citizen of the U.S.
I think that's actually true.
I wouldn't be surprised if dual citizenship wouldn't be considered the same thing.
And of course, I wasn't born here, so this poor country will never have me as president. Poor thing.
We'll have to make do.
You'll have to make do.
I'm really curious about your listening habits, your music consumption habits. How I know you've got a very busy schedule, and you're drowning in music, so you are listening to it when you're working. But,
right.
But how much music do you listen to? What kind of music do you listen to, and what are you listening to now?
So sometimes I do feel drowning a bit because it's a kind of a good verb because for instance, these past two the concert tonight, we have 7 pieces we're doing. They're short, but there's 7 of them. And the concert happened to be the concert last weekend were 5 pieces, again, kind of short. So it's like 12 or 13 pieces sort of jumbling around at the same time in my head. So sometimes I do feel a bit of the drowning thing because, some people are really good at they just inhale music, and I have to really sit down and learn this stuff, So in a way, when I'm not doing that, I don't listen to other stuff as a kind of relief. The music, I'm a bit of a nerd. Classical music is my favorite music other than early rock music, which I grew up with, which I really like.
Okay.
And you're going to laugh because you're going to think I'm an old hippie. So I of course I like I shouldn't say of course, I do like the Beatles. I mean, they're a phenomenon. I like things like Led Zeppelin, and I like the Cream are incredible, and I like Genesis and this stuff which people sometimes mock these days, but I still actually like that. I don't know how much I listen to it.
Who's mocking Cream? Who's mocking Genesis?
What's the name for that music which some people think is overly complicated? Like the Yes,
just trying to think of what
Genesis,
term you mean.
And there is a term for this stuff. No, mocking's too strong a word, but I do actually like that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't listen to it very much. I actually like, this is really I do think it's very good, but it's kind of sentimental because when I was at college, did I tell you I graduated from Yale? I listened to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young. Mm-hmm. I like that stuff. I do occasionally listen to that. It really brings back memories, It's really powerful, actually, that sort of thing. But then basically I... when I kind of got into classical music more and more, the music from the 80s onwards, not happening for me really. And I've never really got into jazz. It just hasn't been my thing. So, oh, really? You're kidding. I feel bad to say that on air.
No. I just feel like I can't.
Just isn't my thing.
I've listened to a lot of jazz, and I've listened to nothing that I've liked.
It's funny, isn't it? It doesn't speak to me for some reason.
Yeah, and I have to remind myself that that's what's happening is it's not speaking to me. I'm not hearing something that's bad necessarily.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't.
Because I know so many people whose opinions I really trust.
Yeah.
But I have yet to find, like Shakespeare for JJ, I have yet to find jazz that's truly accessible to me. Like, it's not in my blood at all. But
It's weird, isn't it?
At the same time, though, I understand that, jazz and the blues are sort of at the core of all American music.
Right.
After the 20th, at the dawn of the 20th century.
Right. I think that's probably true. I mean, I do like... Sometimes I like blues if it's because it's so soul. When they're hard as out there, it's so soulful. But jazz for some reason it's funny that. But so I so what do I listen to? I don't know. I mean, I like opera actually. Well, certain opera. I like my favorite period of music. It is probably the 20th century. A period of sort of classical music, if that makes sense. I do kind of like listening to stuff which is new classical music, stuff which has been written, orchestral music. But I don't spend a huge amount of time outside what I'm actually working on, kind of listening.
I've always wondered how much, someone's childhood really locks in music tastes or even an ear for something. So
I think it does.
So
actually.
JJ and I, 84, 85 babies. So we grew up with Nintendos and digital sounds and computers. And so when most of the listening that I do is not what I would call intentional listening, where I'm sitting down and really paying attention to the music. It's usually something that's playing while I'm doing something else. And for that, I specifically prefer electronic music with no words that's playing on an internet stream that I've never heard before, so that it's always there, and I like having that be in the room with me, but I'm not sitting in intentionally listening to it. But I also think that I have an ear for it because the era I was born in, the era I grew up in, the sounds that I was used to as a kid, the music of Super Mario. When you're 5 years old, you just think of it as music. You don't really think of it as as video game music.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I'd never thought of that. I'm sort of the opposite in the sense that I don't ever. I'm not poo-pooing this. Please don't get me wrong here. But I don't put music on as background music. I either have it there or I don't. So
yeah,
my wife actually does she always has music in the background, and I just don't do that. So you're right. What you grew up with actually is a hugely important thing. So my parents are not musicians, but they were avid classical music lovers. That's why classical music for me has never been particularly hard to like, and why part of my job obviously is to not proselytize, but as the face of the orchestra, musically speaking, I'm trying to get people excited about this stuff, and it's kind of I've never had to go through. What so many people have to go through, understandably, this is complicated stuff, and I get it why people don't necessarily take to it. There's an intimidation factor, unfortunately, sometimes. So I can't relate to that myself, but I'm aware that that's what happens. And that's why I said to you, JJ, if you hear something unfamiliar and it just isn't quite working, but you suddenly hear part of it, which is beautiful, and that can sort of bring you into a piece. I often mention that to people. There's a piece we're playing tonight, which is like that, and obviously like that, which is John Carigliano's violin concerto, the red violin, the chaconne. This is that's actually the red violin music from the film.
Yep.
And in fact, this one movement is the first movement of what was eventually his violin concerto. But anyway, it has lots of weird harmonies and special effects, which could be alienating to some people, but the tune is so beguiling that it just kind of sucks you in. And I think that can apply to people. I try to get people to latch onto something. So my parents, my dad in particular, used to have these most amazing speakers, by the way. I don't know what they were now, but fantastic old speakers, which were such a great quality. He used to blast this stuff out. And to begin with, I used to hate it. When I was a little kid, it just, shrieking opera. I'm thinking of these women shrieking at the top of their, what is this? But actually it got into my bloodstream. Because although opera took me a while to get to like, I love it now. It was percolating away, just as you say, from just having it as part of your background when you're a little kid.
Right. I guess it could have the opposite effect too. Like if you grew up just hearing nothing but Cher, and you're like, I hate Cher.
Yeah, you because have a violent reaction.
I was surrounded by it constantly.
My parents would fight, my mom would listen to John Denver, so I can't listen to John Denver without feeling like, ooh, are mom and dad on the rocks right now?
Right. Oh, right.
I have similar feelings about the movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman.
Oh, really?
So do you think, though, that I think the opposite reaction is indeed often, but maybe eventually you come around to it again. So my son is a musician. My daughter is completely allergic to classical music, or so she claims. Right? So I'm thinking that maybe later on, because it has to be in her blood somewhere, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know.
The other question I wanted to ask you is, are there elements of your life that inform your art that are not musical? So when I think of JJ, although he does a lot of different things, I would say he's primarily a comedian. And a comedian's art is being informed every day by, what they read in the news that day, and the people they talk to, and the books they're reading, and the music they're listening to, and the movies they saw, and all these other things that sort of inform their art and how they approach it. Would you say there's anything
that's a great
that's
question.
non-musical that informs your art?
So this is a hard one. I would say maybe life in general, sort of life's experience and kind of growing up.
JJ, you going to drink this coffee?
No, it's all you, buddy.
Trying to get... I think going through life informs the communication with players, right? The more you do, and not necessarily the better you get, but you get a little wiser. So, why am I going up at the end of sentences? It's a Fargo thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Anyway.
it really is.
Everything's like a question?
I hate that. We're
I
not
don't
people
know.
I'm not
Why
gonna do
am I
this.
going with an up inflection?
I know. So I think maybe just getting older and more experienced and possibly wiser informs that part of my work, but the music side, I would say probably theater.
Okay.
And because my wife is a theater, we go to the theater all the time, and I like theater much more than music, I have to say.
As a consumer? As sitting in the
I prefer
audience?
to go to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I do. So, yeah, it's a bit it sits a bit uncomfortably that when I'm sort of asking people to come to my concerts, and I'm thinking I wouldn't go to my concerts. So
I've been in plays where I thought, don't feel like you got to come to this one.
right. So I think because of sort of trying to plumb the depths of theater a bit must inform music. No, I think so. I don't know about other aspects of life directly informs or affects the process of learning a piece of music. It probably affects my taste.
I think there is something in there because I read once the late writer Christopher Hitchens had talked about that since he was only a nonfiction writer, he never wrote fiction, never read fiction.
Have you read his books?
I have. I read a few of them. And when asked about why he thought that there might be a correlation between the fact that he also had no ear for music, that the great fiction writers he knew personally were also either great musicians or really loved music, would spend time listening to it.
And he didn't.
And he didn't. He didn't really have an ear for it. He could appreciate a good song from time to time,
but it wasn't his
he
thing,
had no musical ability himself, no rhythm, no sense of pitch, and didn't really dive into it. And he felt that there might be some sort of, subcutaneous connection between the two. And I've always wanted to ask someone who has the music in their blood, so to speak, if you think there would be anything to that. Maybe your connection with music and live theater, which is fiction, usually, sometimes based off reality, but that there might be a connection there too.
I don't really know. I mean, and I think of myself as a fairly unimaginative person compared with many artists, which, so I don't know if there's a correlation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not that much out of the box. I don't think. Maybe some people disagree. I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Sorry, I don't have an answer to it.
That's fine. Yeah. Comment on our Facebook if you think you have the answer to that question.
Right.
We're getting down to the end of this episode, but I've got 3 things I'd like to bring up that I've been thinking about this whole time. Number 1, have you ever conducted a piece while the composer is present?
Oh yes, lots.
What's that experience like?
So it's been usually good. So, once horrible, once in between. So usually good because, why? Okay, so I like doing that. I think it's really important. I'm going up the end of sentences again. Jesus.
I graduated from Yale?
Without trying to sound pompous, going down at the end of sentences, it's really important to do music by living composers because that's how this all came about, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't have your Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky without it. So I think it's an important thing to do, and I love the fact... I think it's exciting to bring a new piece to life. I love the fact that the composer's there, so you can call the guy up rather than Beethoven. What can you do?
And even then, he wouldn't be able to hear you.
Very good, very good, very good. And I sort of like that living process, that the way that works, that putting something together, a bit like a play, right? Putting a play on. So, and I take pride, actually, I must say, in studying the music hard when it's brand new. You've got nothing to rely on, no recordings or anything. And when I study, what I do is I really study it, and if I find what I think are mistakes or inconsistencies, I call out the composer or I email them and say, and I usually have a list of it, because everyone, there's something, And what is interesting, that I'm thinking they will either be impressed or taken aback or something. But what normally happens is, because they're all different. A lot of them, when they're tiny details which are different, they say, no, I meant that. That's exactly right. Thank you for they're very polite. Thank you for pointing out. I meant that. Often they say, oh, that is a mistake, blah, blah, blah. So I get into that whole thing with the composer before they come. If they come to the performances, which I hope they do, sometimes they're invited and we try to make something of it. They are almost without exception, very... I mean, I'm a bit scared when they're there, obviously, but they usually want the conductor to take control, even though they usually have a very strong idea of how they want it to go, of course. They do actually want someone at the helm. They themselves don't really want to be at the helm. They want you to deal with it. So it's usually there have been two exceptions. One was horrible. I'm not going to mention the guy's name. It would be silly. Famous American composer, a composer who... Suddenly, when I was rehearsing and I stopped to say something to the orchestra, just said, I wouldn't spend time doing that. Why don't you at least start taking the tempi that I bothered to write down? I mean, he really gave me shit in front of the orchestra. Not nice.
No,
not a nice thing to do.
That's not a professional way to handle it.
No, and it was humiliating, and that wasn't good. Another time, and that person that was that. Another time with another well-known American composer I will not mention, but we're friends because I've done much of his work and I like him. This was also not nice because he's also a conductor as well as composer. And he's got a fiery type A personality, right? He was respectful, but he said, Chris, I think... this bit's not going. Let me show you how to do it. And he jumped up.
Yeah, bad.
Only times. Otherwise, good. And I have to say, I'm proud of this. I've done almost 40 premieres in my life. 40.
Really?
Not different composers, but probably 10, 12, 15 different composers, pieces of many composers. I've done many of their pieces, including, premieres. World premieres and American premieres and a lot of state premieres and stuff like that. We did one just the other... Well, it was a co-premiere, which means that we were part of a consortium of different orchestras doing the same piece. Yep. We did one in the last concert, actually, Jennifer Higdon Harp Concerto.
Yep, I was going to say, the harpist, that was part of that piece, wasn't it? Or am I thinking before?
It was in November, that concert. Yep. It was commissioned for Yolanda Condonasis was the harpist. It was commissioned. She commissioned this piece from Jennifer Higdon for her. So it was written for her.
It's and we were one of beautiful.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. That's great. Yeah. And some pieces I really take to more than others. There's a composer I adore, and every piece I've done by her, Czech composer who's a friend of mine. I haven't done her music. Actually, that's not true. We have done one piece of hers. My audition concert, we did a small piece of hers, but she's written some large-scale symphonic pieces which I absolutely love. And there's a spectrum. I love some I don't quite speak. But professionally, you obviously prepare everything, and the process. Even if I don't like the piece particularly, I do enjoy the process of doing it.
I would like to say, I just like to call out some harpists, though, who are on YouTube, because they try to play their harp like it's an electric guitar, and it looks silly. Don't do that. You're a harp.
Do that.
Don't try to meddle on a harp. Play beautiful music on a harp. Anytime I see I went down a YouTube rabbit hole of harp music like 2 weeks ago because I happened upon a cover of a Ween song, Bananas and Blow, that a woman who I think was going to university for harp, she had done a cover of it. So her and a second harp did it. And it was gorgeous. It blew me away, far better than the actual Ween song, Bananas and Blow, right? Which is not considered a beautiful song. It's considered a silly song. And you play it on harp with this arrangement, and it transforms the piece completely. And they weren't doing like the electric guitar stuff. They were just doing what I would assume is sort of classical.
Have you? Yolanda's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Yep.
This woman is she's got hands like. She just spit you out for breakfast.
Oh, I'm sure.
She's really, because you think a harp is like some sort of girly instrument.
No, not at all. I mean, that is a difficult piece.
She's got the most amazing. I mean, big, long fingers and serious hands and she showed. She's got these calluses because calluses have to build up just to play this thing. But she plays the harp like there's incredible rhythmic precision and big sound and.
But like when Jethro Tull brought a flute on stage, it's like no,
that's another band I love.
Don't do
by
that.
the way,
Really?
Thick as a Brick and Aqualung. I forgot that. That's great music.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 2: has anyone had a chance to ride your coattails? Have you returned that favor?
Unfortunately, I'm not famous enough. I think if I were a famous conductor with a major orchestra, maybe they would. People have. I certainly let people come to my rehearsals when they want, and. People I've had because of my position really on university faculty, as I was saying, CCM and then the Hart School. I've had many students, and some of them keep in touch, and I get calls a lot asking for advice and all that, but not coattailing because I'm not at the head of a major orchestra.
Sure, but you're offering that advice. And
I'm
sure that there's plenty
maybe you
of
don't
people.
know this.
I
was going to say we have a workshop here. Did you know we run with Linda, my counterpart, executive director of the orchestra.
Previous JJ Meets World guest, Linda Boyd.
Linda, yeah, who I love, by the way, for the record. I'm happy to say on this. She's fantastic. She's the best executive director I've ever worked with. And that is another topic and probably a little boring, and certainly you don't have time now, but not boring.
We're very lucky to have her.
No, because the relationship between music director and executive director is kind of a strange one. There has to be tension involved there because they hold the purse strings, right? And you're trying to program stuff. And she manages, I think, and I hope she would return the compliment to a certain extent, she manages to put it this way. When we talk about programming, it's a pleasure rather than just a frustration, which it often can be with executive directors. Because they say, Chris, you can't do that. We don't have the money for it, which is true often. But she makes it seem that
And is that money specifically? We don't have the ability to hire these types of music, this amount of musicians, or is it?
It can be translated into many things. Often that, yeah. Okay. Chris, if you insist on doing a Mahler symphony, then this next program has to be small Mozart stuff because sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was the coattailing? So. Yep. No, the workshop. So, I said that I'd left academia. I jumped ship because it was frustrating in many ways. But one way wasn't frustrating was I've always liked having conducting students because I like doing that. And so I kind of kept that going by having this workshop. What this means is that young conductors come for 3 days and they conduct the orchestra. And they prepare pieces, and we have also, what we call seminars on the side, dealing with all the aspects of conducting. They come for just 3 intense days on the back of one of our concerts here, called a conducting workshop. So, so I've kind of kept that going. It's not coattailing, of course, but that's me being a teacher to these people. And then over the years, people call me from the past. I just got a call actually yesterday. From a student, someone who was my student 15 years ago, asking for advice on stuff, and I'm happy to do that. I like doing that.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
and it's
fun.
It's teaching it can be part of somebody's blood just like music can, right? And so if you've got that gift, it's great that you're continuing to share that with other people.
Yeah, I like doing that. I'm happy to take the time.
You know, after you graduate from Yale, you know, that relationship continues years on. One of my best friends is my high school drama teacher, and I go to her for advice all the time.
You know, you have a mentor.
Friendship, yeah.
That's Greg Carlson and I, for sure.
Well, without a doubt.
For sure.
All my mentors died, unfortunately. That's just not quite true. There's one guy, actually.
Way to one-up us. My mentor's dead.
Actually, there's a guy who was not... who I like to call him my mentor because I always go to him for advice. But he wasn't when I was a kid. He was when I was actually at... when I was in one of my jobs at CCM, the first job over here. David Hoos is his name. He's a conductor who was on the faculty. He's retired now from this job, not retired from conducting. He was kind of my equivalent at CCM at Boston University School of Music. And this guy just, to me, I always go to him and he always has answers for me, But he's not much, he's a bit older than me, but not much. So he's a kind of a contemporary mentor.
So let me round out this entire thing. I've mentioned this quote before, and I think maybe the first time I met you, I told you this quote, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on it. It's a story from another podcast, Stephen Tobolowsky's The Tobolowsky Files. He tells a wonderful small story about a conductor conducting a piece of music for an orchestra, and they've done this piece many times before. It's a staple of their orchestra, and he just doesn't feel any passion when he's conducting it. And he stops and says, ladies and gentlemen, I know that you've done this many times before. I know that you know this music inside and out, and it's showing right now that there's some fatigue with this piece. But I want you to think of two people who are going to be in the audience for this show. I want you to think of the person who's hearing this for the very first time. And so, true that you've heard this piece hundreds of times, but somebody tonight will hear this for the first time. And on the exact same scale, somebody will be hearing this for the last time in their life tonight.
Wow, I'd never thought of that last bit.
It to me that just speaks volumes about actually, what it is.
Thank you for telling me that. I like that. I will remember this when I don't think I'm fatigued yet. But this is actually very helpful.
It's just an interesting thing to think about.
The first time in life I've thought of, I never thought of the last. Yeah.
Right, and I think everyone thinks of that first time, but they don't think of the individual who, the next day shuffles off the mortal coil, and this was the last time that they heard it, or the last time they're able to make it out to a concert.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a very. I think that quote is so powerful, and especially when it comes to music and when it comes to
this was
live
worth coming
performance.
To.
Oh, good. Glad you got something out of it.
Yeah. Only took us 100 episodes to get a guest to say that. I'm really happy I came.
Christopher Zimmerman, thank you so much for taking time today.
Thanks, thanks, Tyler.
You've got a website, right, where people can come and seek out some information.
Lots of pictures of me.
Oh, good.
And it says things like graduated from Yale.
Yeah, put a face to the voice.
Is it ChristopherZimmerman.net?
It is ChristopherZimmerman.net. Yeah,
ChristopherZimmerman.net.
How did you know that?
I did some Googling a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And of course, people can see you conduct live with the Fargo-Moorhead Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, tonight and tomorrow. I hope people will come.
That's great. And then the shows go throughout the year, and you're here for every one, right?
I am. Funnily enough, I'm not here for the next one.
Oh, really?
We have a guest for the next one, who is, you probably know him. He's very, very well known in this area, René Clausen.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And he's written his own piece. We've kind of commissioned him.
Really?
So he's written a piece for the orchestra, and he's going to conduct it.
Oh, that's
very
exciting.
The whole program, so that should be good. So go to that. Yeah.
So the next one, if you see the folk, the man on the box will not be Christopher
me.
Zimmerman.
It will not be me. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking some time with us
Thanks,
today.
guys. I enjoyed it very much. Cheers.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. Do not ask me to get a soup can down for you if you invite me to your house. I am your guest. I am not going to get down a soup can or that roll of paper towel that rolled to the back of the pantry. If I am a guest in your house, you can ask me one thing that involves height, and that's to give you a piggyback ride.